Welcome back, everyone, to the Winning Play Podcast. Alongside Drew James, I am your host, Kendall Capps. Drew, we finished our first draft for Fanatical Fantasy. It's, I know we're in a bunch of leagues, but it's the one that every year we pretty much are cutthroat and care the most about.
The League of Record.
The League of Record, been going for 15 years or so, and I got to say, even though ESPN might not like my team, I personally think I had a really, really good time, and I look forward to this season. How about you?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I got to say, I'm kind of always feeling really good at this time of year, but I like my team a lot.
It was an interesting draft, and I actually took some time, and I was looking back at some of the picks that some of our, co-players, I guess, some of our competitors made throughout the draft, and there was some really interesting tidbits that I thought were worth mentioning here. So I kind of want to go over some of maybe of our key takeaways, knowing this league generally tends to follow a lot of what most leagues out there do to kind of give our listeners an idea of where some guys might land. And then also maybe some surprises that you or I might have noticed throughout the whole thing. And my first takeaway when I went back and looked at everything was Bijan dropping to 8th overall. It's the latest that I've seen him go, including many of mock drafts that I did. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this league is 3 wide receivers and PPR. With the flex, you can start up to 4 wide receivers. So I do think a lot of times this league goes a little wide receiver heavy. Bijan still win as running back 3. I'm not entirely surprised. Really, the one that surprised me the most not taking him was you at pick 7, going with Jamar Chase. So you're guilty of it too. I have to say, if he had lasted one more pick, I would have taken him at 9. But yes. Yeah, definitely a faller there. What other guys were kind of on your list that fell further than you'd thought?
Well, it's actually funny. Before we even mention that, you mentioned Jamar Chase and me taking him, and I just have to say, and the news today is the reports out of Cincinnati, Jamar Chase is going to be ready and will play in week 1. They haven't signed a deal, but knowing he's now shown up at practice the last couple of days, which he had basically held out from, and now all the reports are that he's going to play week 1. I don't know if that's with or without a deal, but it sounds as though there is a deal imminent, and anyone out there who hasn't had their draft yet, who's contemplating at pick 6 or 7 like I was the other night, it's okay, and it should be safe to draft Jamar Chase. So I wanted to get that news and note out there. But I guess maybe one of the other big surprises that I noticed in the draft, the fact that Anthony Richardson, which I know he's a darling coming into this draft at quarterback, he actually went off the board as the 3rd quarterback picked, 45th
in the 4th round. Yeah.
And meanwhile, someone like Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, 2-time MVP coming off another stud season, was the 6th quarterback taken and went 27 picks later. It was really...
I think Lamar went at the end of round 6.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me, and I wonder, are we going to start to see that in our upcoming drafts? Is that a trend, or is that an anomaly that people are really that in love with Richardson this season?
I think it's a mistake. Personally, I would take Lamar over Richardson. Obviously, I waited a little longer on a quarterback than that, but also I think CJ Stroud went ahead of Lamar, which is crazy to me. I mean, Lamar's been a top 3 quarterback for the last 5 or 6 years, it feels like. So I don't know what people are seeing that I'm not seeing there.
I know Stroud, a lot of people just think that because he has all these weapons and he had an unbelievable rookie season, which he did, and he is clearly legit, and he's going to be around likely for a very long time and be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Houston runs the ball a lot. They run the ball a lot inside the red zone. I love Stroud. I love him as a football player, and he's certainly going to be a very good fantasy quarterback. But to see him going ahead of Lamar Jackson, who provides such a higher floor, was really, really confusing to me. So I'm with you there.
Now, and we also went differently with our team makeup this year. You started off wide receiver. with Jamar and Devontae Adams. And I did something I've never done before in this league, which is go running back, taking Jonathan Taylor at 9 and then Pacheco in round 2. I've never won this league in 15 years, so I feel like it's time to do something different. But I really like how it stacked up because I was able to pick up what I feel like is a pretty good wide receiver crew. But one of the guys that I have that I'd like to know your opinion on is Cooper Kupp. I grabbed him in the 4th round. I know people are really into Puka Nacua over Kupp, but I really think Kupp this year is going to be back to form. And the last time we saw him healthy he was setting every receiving record in the books.
I believe that Kupp, when healthy, which he's as healthy now as he has been in a couple of years, at least all reports indicate that, there is zero reason to think that he is not going to be, at the very least, a low wide receiver 1. And the difference between he and Puka, the fact that Puka is going generally early to mid-second round in a lot of drafts, and Kupp is going 20 to 25 picks later, ADP, is unbelievable, insane, and I'll give you some reasons why. So last year, when both were healthy and on the field, the target share was 27% Nacua, 26.5% for Cooper Kupp. So they were right there in how often they were getting targeted. Now, yeah, Puka's was receiving more downfield targets, and if I had to choose one anywhere, like if you were in an auction draft, let's say, yeah, I think Puka probably has a little bit more value. But the fact that I can wait 2 to 3 rounds and get what I fully expect to be a 1B situation, not a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2 in Los Angeles, I am more than thrilled to have Kupp on my team in the 4th or 5th round as opposed to taking Puka up in the 2nd.
I love to hear that. Love to hear it, as he is the anchor of my wide receiving core. What about the Texans? You talked about the Texans wanting to run the ball a lot. They have 3 receivers on the board here. We didn't get Nico Collins going off until the end of round 2, but then you've got Stephon Diggs down at pick 43 here. And Tank Dell somewhere lower, I think, pick 60. What's your take on that receiving group, and what do you foresee for him this year?
That's another, it boggles my mind. And I had Nico Collins last year. I love his talent. He's young. He's explosive. He has a connection with the young quarterback. But so did Tank Dell. And it seemed like we had Nico for a bunch of games without Tank. We had Tank for a bunch of games without Nico. And when one of them was there and the other one wasn't, they both blew up. When they were both there, it was a guessing game who was going to have the big game. Sometimes one had it, sometimes the other had it. And now you add in Stephon Diggs into that mix, who I think at this point it's safe to say he's probably a little bit past his prime, but he's not that far removed from being one of the absolute elite receivers in the game. So for Nico Collins to be going late 2nd round in a lot of PPR drafts, in my opinion, massive reach. There is no chance you couldn't pay me to draft him unless you paid my buy-in. Then I guess maybe I would. But outside of that, there is no reason I am taking him in that spot, knowing I don't even know if he's going to be the wide receiver 1, and he's being drafted as the clear wide receiver 1 on that team.
I wouldn't take him over guys like Michael Pittman that he went above.
Nope.
Probably wouldn't take him over Jalen Waddle. Don't think I'd take him over Mike Evans.
Definitely.
DJ Moore I would take over Nico Collins. I think he's going way underdrafted. But yeah, I felt like that's a reach. And then, when you've got Diggs going for the 43rd pick, again, that's a little bit of a reach to me as well, where we don't know what Diggs is going to do. He hasn't been his classic self the last couple of years. He's in a new system. He's got competition for targets. Where he's going in drafts, I'd much rather, go out and take a Devonta Smith or a Calvin Ridley, somebody in that range. I don't know. I don't trust these Texans receivers much in fantasy, obviously.
Here's the thing. I think all 3 of them will produce and have decent seasons, but it's going to be difficult on a week-to-week basis to know which ones are going to be the ones with 8 and 110 and a touch, and which ones has 4 for 25 on that given week. It's going to be really difficult. And for that reason, give me Tank Dell at pick 60 instead of Nico Collins at pick 24. Like that's just
Definitely.
insane to me that someone could take Nico Collins that high. You actually touched on another guy, and I'm glad you mentioned him because it's astounding to me every year, especially the last couple of years. This guy gets overlooked in drafts year in and year out, and all he does is put up Hall of Fame numbers every year, and that's Mike Evans. And people keep expecting him to take a step back. He doesn't. He almost never does. First, 10 straight years since his rookie season, every single year of his career, at least 1,000 yards every single year. He finished with the third most touchdowns of his career last year, second most receiving yards of his career last year. And I know he's 31, but he was 30 last year, and he put up those numbers, and it's the same offense around him. There's no new stud shiny toy that's going to be taking all these targets away from him. So, and Baker loves to throw the ball down the field. I see zero reason why Mike Evans doesn't have 85 catches for 1,150 yards and 9 to 11 touchdowns again, like he does every single year.
Yeah, I definitely could see that in the future. Well, let's let that take us into our fantasy studs and duds segment here. Are you taking Mike Evans as a stud then?
For sure, especially at his ADP. A lot of people are able to get him in the third, sometimes early fourth rounds, depending on the structure of the league. And it's like, I'm getting what last year finished as wide receiver 7. So he was a mid-tier wide receiver 1 last year. Even if he takes a step back a little bit, he's still a low-end wide receiver. So, I absolutely love Mike Evans for where he's going right now.
All right, well, give us a dud then. If you love Mike Evans, give us a wide receiver you're not so.
I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about him. Stephon Diggs. He's one guy that really stands out to me that not only is he walking into a system where there are already 2 young receivers who have a connection with a young quarterback, and it's a lot of mouths to feed, but also we've seen when he doesn't get his mouth fed, things tend to fall apart in the locker room a little bit. A lot was made up of the issues between he and Josh Allen. And if the connection continues with Tank and Nico Collins and Diggs becomes a possession receiver and isn't getting, he's only getting 5-6 targets a game and he's used to double that, does he start to complain? Is there some issues there? And could that then affect his performance even further? Could he be relegated to your bench by week 6 or week 8? Yeah, that's within the realm of possibility for him. And for that reason, with where he's going, I'm fading every bit of him that I can fade.
Well, for my stud, let's go with a guy that I know you like as well, and he's on my team, Isaiah Pacheco. I think, looking at what he did at the end of last year in the playoffs, this guy is going to be their bell cow in Kansas City. He's going to get a ton of touches on a great offense. I don't know what's not to like about him, especially I've got him now as my RB2. I think he's a solid stud for the year. How about you?
I think he finishes top 5 running back rankings this year. We touched a little bit on it last week. And when Jerick McKinnon wasn't dressing, his touches, everything went up. His efficiency, everything. And McKinnon still is a free agent. So if he even gets a slight bump in volume, given that offense, given the fact they actually run the ball top 5 in the league in the red zone, in goal-to-goal situations, they run the ball quite often. And Mahomes isn't quite the runner that he was the first couple years of his career. He's still going to have a couple rushing touchdowns. He's going to poach a couple himself. But I see zero reason why the man who runs like he hates the ground does not ball out again this year. Which, seriously, I forget who it was that I heard say that on TV a year and a half ago. And I have never seen a more accurate statement related to a football player than that. His spikes, they dig into the ground with every step the guy takes. It's amazing.
He's a powerful runner. And I'm right with you. I think he's going to have a huge year. What about a running back dud? Who are you not liking this year?
Saquon is certainly one that stands out. And again, all of these players that we're talking about in the studs and duds, it's all in relation to ADP. Do I think Saquon is going to have a decent year? Yes. In that offense, if he stays healthy, it's going to be really difficult for him not to produce to some degree. But he's going late in the first round. And for a guy who I think it's 3 years straight now that his yards after first contact, yards per carry, like everything is declining. And knowing you bake in the potential with his injury history, I'm not willing to pay that kind of price for someone with that many red flags to me. So that's one running back that I would potentially think about fading. And then another guy that I have some questions about, he's also being drafted pretty early. And admittedly, I did get him in one of my drafts the other day, is Travis Etienne. In a full PPR league, I think he's going to be a good running back too, but he's being drafted as a low RB1. And he's another one where he was expected to take another step forward last year, and he just didn't quite do that.
I mean, he did finish as RB3 last year.
He finished as RB3.
Yes, he did.
Because some of the measures I looked at, I was really disappointed, but I didn't realize he finished that high.
Yeah,
well,
he had caught almost 60 balls helps, and he had 12 touchdowns. But
all right, well, as we know, year to year, touchdown regression happens significantly more to running backs than it does receivers. So if he had 12 touchdowns last year, I'd be willing to bet he's closer to the 6 to 8 range this year.
And that tracks for me.
Down to an RB2 tier.
Let's see what else. Tight ends. Who are you liking at tight end this year? Studs and duds.
I mean, this year there's a clear 10 tight ends that I think you want on your team, probably capping at that either Ferguson or Njoku line. I think just about everybody knows once you get below there, you're going to be potentially streaming week to week, unless you get Hawkinson and then he comes back and he's valuable.
Who's on the PUP? They just announced today.
Yes. And so like knowing those 10, and there's obviously different tier breaks, but Trey McBride is generally going as the 4th tight end off the board. I think he has the opportunity in that offense this year, especially in a PPR league where he's going to get just peppered with targets. I absolutely think a tight end 1 or tight end 2 is within the realm of his possibility this year. So I really like him where his ADP is going. What do you think about him?
I like him. I mean, it's a little higher up than I'm usually willing to go on tight ends. I know I took a guy that you're not as big on, Mark Andrews. I got him. I feel like the price on Mark Andrews is like mid-round 6, which is right about where I'm ready to start buying a tight end. But I know he's in your dud list. What do you not like about Mark Andrews?
You know, it's crazy, and I'm sure I'm going to be on an island with this one. But I was shocked when I went back and looked. So in 2021, he had monster season. He had 1,300 yards receiving, I think just over 100 catches or something. Like absolute monster tight end numbers, right? Like elite wide receiver numbers. He has not surpassed 850 yards receiving in any other year of his career whatsoever. Not a single other year has he surpassed 850 yards. And knowing that offense, which I think is going to struggle more than a lot of people expect them to, they lost 3 starting offensive linemen already. And they're not going to be putting themselves in nearly the down and distance favorable down and distance. I don't think as often as they're accustomed to without the strength of that offensive line that they've had for seemingly 20 years. I do think that he is not going to produce as many touchdowns and or yards as he normally would. His catches might come back up, and he might catch 70, 80 balls this year. But again, that's also if he stays healthy. He missed a bunch of time last year. It's not the first time that that's happened. And knowing the injury risk, and again, knowing that he's actually never had superstar numbers except for one season in his career, but he's generally going as the 3rd tight end off the board, maybe the 4th. That's a little bit high for me. I think you got some decent value getting him where you got him, but in a lot of other leagues that I've seen thus far, he's going a couple rounds earlier, or certainly a couple tight end picks earlier, and I'm just not that high on him.
That makes sense to me. Let me see here. I think he was I want to say at least 4th or 5th tight end in our league.
I believe 5th. He was this. Oh, is he the 5th? Okay.
Yeah, I think because he was behind Trey McBride, behind Kelsey, behind Laporta, and who am I
We
missing?
can address the ghost in the room. Yeah. My daughter just walking through. No worries. Gonna get my chips. She needs some fuel for the homework.
Makes sense. Hey, at least she's doing her homework. That's pretty good start.
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean, any other takeaways from our draft before we move on to some sports betting, or anything you do differently? Anything you're taking forward into your next drafts that you wouldn't do again?
Well, all my remaining drafts are all half PPR, so I have to make a slight adjustment in draft strategy because that makes a pretty big difference in my shakeups in some spots. But I'd say the biggest takeaway is you should just mail me the trophy now. I'll save you the time, and I can just put it up on the mail. I gotta, last year finishing first and losing the title game, and it's like my third title game loss in the last 6 years. It's starting to really, really bother me. So I really need to cap off one of these so I can get that trophy
rename
back.
You the 49ers.
Yeah,
Dominate the regular season, drop it in the title game.
Yep, that sounds about right.
All right, well, let's look at some sports betting. You're, the season's starting next week, so we're finally almost able to start breaking down game by game. But why don't we do some overall season-long win totals? What teams are you liking to outperform or underperform where their line is?
So there's always value in futures when you're looking at lines, and knowing we don't have any data to go off of on week to week in the season kicking off next week. Really, outside of the money line parlay that I talked about last week, the only spot where I feel like there's still some value is recognizing which teams you really like on those over-under lines. And the first team that I want to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens. We referenced them. They're sitting at 10.5 wins for the season, and you got to lay a little extra juice at minus 120 if you like the over. The betting public certainly likes the over. I like the under. That division, every year, it's a slobber knocker. Knowing the potential risk for injury to either Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, they have Zay Flowers, and then no receivers again. They're still rolling out Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman, those failed projects. So they don't have a whole lot of weapons. I know they added Derrick Henry. That can't be overlooked, obviously, but that might be mitigated when you lose 3 offensive linemen and to injury. Their starting center, who was a baller as a rookie last year, that could have a serious impact. And for all those reasons, knowing I get even money to take the under, I could still see them winning that division at 10-7. So I actually think there's more value there. How about yourself?
Yeah, I like the under there. I think, like you said, the division's tough. The Browns are better. The Steelers actually have a quarterback now. The Bengals hopefully have a healthy quarterback. I think 11 wins is going to be a lot to ask for. So
yeah, in that division, especially again, you have to always bake in with that team. What if Lamar goes down in week 6? The under is almost a lock at that point, right?
Very true.
Could very well happen. And I feel like a lot of the betting public doesn't take that into account.
What about moving over to the NFC? I see the Bears are listed as 8.5. Is there over and underline? You'd like the Bears to go over or under 8.5 wins?
Man, this one's a really good line because obviously everyone likes the Bears coming into this year, including myself. They absolutely should improve. Caleb Williams, he looks legit, right? I know it's only been preseason, but he looks every bit the part, and they are loaded on offense. And for the last 3-4 years, they've had a pretty solid defense, and it was the offense that was so inept they couldn't get out of their own way, whether it was Justin Fields throwing pick sixes all the time or whoever it was that they were throwing out there, Trubisky before that. At the very least, the Bears fans, they should have a fun season watching their team. But, man, the betting public really loves the over, and you have to lay minus 160 if you want to, bet that they're going to finish above 500 this year. And that's a lot of juice to lay. And I get they have a light schedule, but I don't know. This one might be a fade. It's really tough because I do like the team. I love Caleb Williams. I like what they're doing. But man, to lay that kind of juice, am I that confident they're going to have a winning record this year? I don't know if I am.
I'm going to go with the over here. I think, given the fact that they get to play the AFC South, which may be one of the weakest divisions in football, and they also have a last place schedule, so they are playing teams like the Commanders, they're playing the Panthers. I think this team could win actually 10 or 11 games, and really, I think, compete to win that division, which is tough, I know, with the Lions and Packers. So their division schedule is tough, but I think their non-division schedule is soft enough this year, playing the Texans, the Jaguars, the Colts. I think they're going to eke out probably 10 wins, where I'd put them at.
That would be impressive if they do. I mean, you touched on another reason as to why I guess I'd have a hard time making that bet. Like 6 games against that division, the Packers could easily be a 10-11 win team. The Lions could be an 11-13 win team. In Minnesota, obviously, everyone expects them to be the cellar dweller there, but there's still some talent on that team.
He's not a quarterback, but yeah.
With Chicago seemingly every year. So if that holds true to form this year as well, like it's going to be tough. But like I said, at the very least, Bears fans, it should be a really fun ride for you. But let's stay in that division. Lions, like the Ravens, sitting at 10.5. You got to lay 130 if you like the over. You actually get plus 110 if you take the under. Where you land on there?
Ooh, again, 10. We both talked about this team as a potential division winner, possibly a Super Bowl team. I think I'd take the over. I don't know if I want to make that bet, but I would take the over. Like you said, I think this team could put up 13 wins. They also get to play the AFC South. I think the Lions don't play an outdoor game for the first 16 weeks of the season or something. Like their schedule is all inside stadiums, which is great for the Lions. I think things are they're gonna improve upon last year and take another step forward this year.
Yeah, it's hard to find. Honestly, it's hard to find holes in this team. I guess on defense, they certainly have some issues on the back end, and they address that to some degree, but they're not going to be a great defense by any means. But man, like I've rarely seen a team take on the personality of their head coach more than I have with this Lions team. And I just have a hard time envisioning them resting on their laurels of last year and falling flat this year. And like you said, getting to play that AFC South division, they should win at least 3, if not all 4 of those games possibly. And yeah, in conference, they got to play all the division winners. They're going to have to play the Cowboys. They're going to have to play the Niners. So like they obviously have some difficult games on their schedule. But with that 17th game, 11-6, I feel like is more likely than 10-7 or worse. So I'm with you. I'd probably lay the juice and bet the over there.
All right. Well, I got one for you. What do you think about the Chargers this year? We got a new coach, got a new receiving core, new running backs. This team's a whole no-look team. I see their line is at 8.5. You think the Chargers are going past that or falling behind?
It's weird. I get why there is so much reluctance from a lot of people. Well, I guess there's not that much reluctance because you have to lay 140 if you bet the over. So the betting public as a whole thus far is with me in liking the over. But outside of Harbaugh, it's hard for me to really make a huge case for it. Like my case is Jim Harbaugh. Everywhere he has gone, he has won, and he has won immediately. That's at every college he has been, including the pros with the Niners. It did not take long for him to turn things around really quickly. And knowing the Raiders and the Broncos are still, let's face it, not very good football teams that have some serious question marks on both sides of the ball. The Chargers are the second most talented team in the division. They still have a lot of talent on defense. Granted, by week 6, half of those guys are usually injured, which again goes into why I don't have a huge leg to stand on why I'm betting this over outside of Harbaugh, but I'm just a huge Harbaugh believer. So I'm going to bet that over and lay that juice.
I think I'm inclined to go with you on the over. I do not buy all the Charger hype, but I will say where I agree with you. This is another team that gets to play the NFC South. I think they should probably sweep the NFC South, if not go 3-1. And mix it in wins over the Raiders and the Broncos, I don't see any way they don't end up with probably 9 wins. I don't see them going much higher than that, but I think 9 or 10 is right where I'd have them. And then a quick exit from the playoffs.
Well, and speaking of like 9-win teams, how about the Steelers, which seemingly every year they go into week 17 or what's now week 18, wondering, are they going to finish with a winning record? Now, granted, last year they actually won 10, so they actually put that to bed a week earlier than the end of the season. But, Mike Tomlin, he's working on that streak since 2005, his first year as a head, or 2006, first year as a head coach. He's had a winning record every year, and I know Steelers fans are probably tired of listening to that stat because all that means is they maybe make the playoffs, but they haven't done anything with it. But Vegas sat that line right there at 8.5, and the betting public actually loves the under at -145. I'm curious where you land.
I like the under here. I know it's hard to bet against Mike Tomlin, and it's definitely hard to bet on him having a losing season. I don't know how this team won 10 games last year. I don't trust Russell Wilson. I don't trust Justin Fields this year. Let me give you the last 6 games of their schedule this year. Or actually, we can even go farther back. The last 8 games, they're playing the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals, the Browns again, the Eagles, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Bengals again. That is a brutal second half of the season. I could see them going 1-7 over those last 8 games, which does not lead me to think they're going to win 9 on the season.
That is totally fair. I did not look at that schedule. What's the front of their schedule?
They open with the Falcons, Broncos, Chargers, Colts.
Oh, even there's no slam dunk.
And then they got the Cowboys, Raiders, Jets, Giants, Commanders as well.
And then they have that finish with those
8 solid games to end the season.
Jesus, no wonder why the betting public is hammering this under.
I would be, yeah.
I mean, now I was going to say, you were like, hey, I can't believe in Russ at this point and Justin Fields. And I was going to counter with, well, what? Like, you believed in Kenny Pickett? Like, they've had trash for years. Big Ben was trash for 3 years at the end of his career, and they still had winning records. But that schedule is brutal. If you're telling me the easy part is the Falcons and the Colts, there's like, those are 2 teams that might be pretty decent football teams this year.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. You have to lay this juice. There's no way you can put money on them winning 9 games with that schedule this year. I just don't see it. You tell me, where are those 9 wins?
That's exactly the thing I'm thinking. Well, what about, here's a team for you. Obviously, we're not picking them to win any divisions here. What about the Commanders? Their over-unders just a 6.5. Can they get to 7 wins, or is it?
No, I kind of like them. Now, granted, I think a lot of people will look at the move of trading Jahan Dotson in division, by the way, which you almost never see, was, peculiar. Were they, basically like saying, all right, well, we're still in rebuilding mode. I think that had a lot more to do with 2 other factors. One, Dotson had reportedly really struggled at camp this year. He's not picking up the offense. He's not clicking with their rookie quarterback. And the youngster Diami Brown is clicking with Jaden Daniels. And I think there's a lot of belief in that building that he might be a better receiver and a better fit for this offense. And then you talk about, you bring in Cliff Kingsbury, you bring in this offense. I think they were one of the teams that had the least snaps per game offensively last year. That's obviously going to change drastically this year. They're going to be a very different look team. And I think Brian Robinson Jr. is far better than people realize. Dude got shot through his quad. He showed up in an NFL game like 30 days later and ran for like 60 yards. Like,
he's a beast.
This dude's a beast. Like, if you look at his, like, what he looks like, he's built similar to Adrian Peterson. And I know it sounds a little crazy. AP is behind probably Barry Sanders, maybe behind Emmitt Smith, the 3rd best running back I've ever seen in my life. And I might actually have him 2nd. He's running. So I know that sounds, but just like body type, build, strength, ability to run between the tackles, but still with shiftiness. And Brian Robinson seems to have that. I'm not saying he is those guys by no means, but do I think that he's a really good player? And then you bring in Eckler to be your new Antonio Gibson, to just be the pass catcher out of the backfield, who can still make guys miss, who still caught 70 balls last year. So for a lot of different reasons, I think they're going to be much better than people think. And in that division where no one's ever won, seemingly it's been 20 years since someone's won it back-to-back years, I actually think they're a live dog in that division. So for that reason, give me the over. I'll lay a little bit of juice, but give me the over. I think they win 7 or 8 games this year.
I'll give you that. Yeah, I've got them at 7. Looking at the schedule, I wouldn't be too happy putting money on that line, especially if you got to pay to go over. But yeah, I got them at 7 wins, so I'll take over 6.5.
So that, I mean, I don't want to dive into all these over-runs. These were some of the ones that we both thought were like really compelling lines and worth talking about. As the season progresses, we'll incorporate different futures bets, but also be breaking down the key games of the week every week, both against the spread and making outright picks, which, when we had a show together many, many years ago, 14 years ago, before podcasting was even a thing, we had a show called Fireside Football, and one of those seasons, I hit at 67% that year against the spread. Now, I don't think I'm going to hit 67 this year, but shit, if I do, I'm going to buy you a round, and, well, no, I'll probably owe my wife many, many rounds, her allowing me to have the time to do this. But yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into the NFL action next week. And obviously, we're going to have multiple components to the show, whether it's the betting angle. We're going to dive into weekly sleepers, value picks, guys you might want to avoid on any given week, anything and everything, both fantasy and betting related. We're going to hit it hard every week for you guys. So please make sure that you tune in the future because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm chomping at the bit, ready to get this season started, bring the trophy home where it belongs. And yeah, it'll be fun taking everybody through the journey with us.
Yes, it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, cool. Well, if you're out there watching, please like and subscribe and share this to your friends. We'll also be posting some supplemental content on socials all week, so you can check us out there for more sleeper picks or draft advice. But yeah, till then, I'm Drew James, and this is Kendall Capps, and this is the Winning Play Podcast.